In the previous videos, we've taken a look at how to use PowerCLI commandlets such as connect-vi server and get-vm. And that's great, but you're probably asking yourself, how do you find out what the other PowerCLI commandlets are? That's what we're going to talk about in this video, so let's go take a look in the lab environment. We're going to be taking a look at various resources that you can use to find out what the PowerCLI commandlets are, and more importantly, what they do and how you use them. But before we talk about PowerCLI commandlets, what if you don't know PowerShell? If you don't know PowerShell, that's fine. You don't have to be an expert, but there are some basics that you really ought to learn. Now, the way I learned PowerShell was to read through this book, but there are lots of books available to teach you about PowerShell. Plus, there are YouTube videos that you could watch, plus there's training that you can take. But one way or another, whether you learn PowerShell through books or videos or training, it doesn't matter how you learn it, but you need to learn some basics. So that includes things such as, what's a variable? How do I define a variable? How do I use a variable? It's also things such as how to do looping and so forth. But again, let's focus on PowerCLI. If you know the name of a PowerCLI commandlet and you want more information about it, you can use the get-help commandlet. Get-help is a PowerShell commandlet that allows you to see manual pages for PowerShell commandlets and PowerCLI commandlets. For example, let's do a get-help on connect-vi server. As you can see, we have information here about the connect-vi server commandlet. The synopsis gives us a brief description what it does. The syntax section lets you know what the different parameters are that you can use with this commandlet. And then in the description section, we have a more detailed description of what this particular commandlet does. As you can see, the manual page for connect-vi server goes on and on and on, providing lots of useful information. You can see examples of how to use the commandlet by doing get-help using the -examples parameter. Let's take a look at that manual page for connect-vi server once again. Let me show you something that can help you to make more sense of the syntax section. I'm going to run a commandlet called show-command. Show command is a graphical utility that will give me information. In particular, it'll give me syntax information about whatever commandlet I tell it I want to look up. So for example, if I say, let's look up connect-vi server, you simply select it here. Each tab is showing different combinations of parameters that you can use when using this particular commandlet. Seeing the same information in the GUI makes it a bit easier to understand what's going on. Plus, the GUI also lets you see things through tooltips to let you know more information about each of these different parameters. As we can see, there are lots of different parameters that are available, but it only makes sense to use them in certain combinations. So the reason why this documentation here is broken up into 1, 2, 3 sections, and over here in the GUI there's 1, 2, 3 sections, is because each of those sections is describing the parameters that you can use together. You now have at least 2 different ways that you can find out what all the parameters are for each commandlet. Now that we know how to look up information about a commandlet when you already know its name, let's talk in general about how to find out what commandlets are available. One way to do that is to use the get-command commandlet using the -module parameter and passing in the name of a module such as PowerCLI. If you run that command, it will give you a list of the commandlets that are part of PowerCLI. To take this in a bit more general direction, if you simply do get-command, you can see all the commandlets in your system. Another way you can find out what PowerCLI commandlets are available is to go to developer.broadcom.com, then click on PowerCLI, and then from that page, if you'll click on View Commandlet References by Product, you'll see the different categories of PowerCLI commandlets. In this video series, we're primarily focusing on the vSphere related commandlets, so let's go explore there. And as you can see, if you look over on the left here, we have all sorts of different sections describing the different major categories of PowerCLI commandlets for vSphere. Let me type Control F to do a find, and let's search for VM. And notice that takes us right here to the VM section. And in the VM section, you can see examples of the various commandlets that are related to virtual machines. So we've got get-vm, new-vm, and this page goes on and on describing what commandlets are available that are related to virtual machines. So for example, if you want to know how to migrate virtual machines, there's a commandlet called move-vm. Simply click on move-vm. And as you can see, you have a description of the move-vm commandlet. You can see its syntax and all the different parameters that you can use. So loads of information in here at developer.broadcom.com. Now that we know how to look up what PowerCLI commandlets are available and how to look up information about each of those, how do you find out information about PowerCLI in general? Well, that's where the VMware PowerCLI user guide comes in hand. You get there by going to this URL. And when you go there, as you can see, there's loads of information in different books here. So there's an entire book on how introducing you to PowerCLI, another on how to install it, and so on and so on. Great information here. When you get a few moments, go explore. But there's one more resource that I'd like to show you, and I will confess that I have actually used this in earlier videos in the series. For example, in earlier parts of this video series, you may have noticed me scroll these examples by on the screen. I use ChatGPT to generate that list. Now, it's not that I don't know the commandlets, it's just that it was a lot faster for me to let ChatGPT create that list for me. All right, now that you know how to access the documentation, you could look up how to do other things, such as how do I work with ESXi servers using PowerCLI commandlets. So if you'd like to, you can use what you learned in this video to go look up that information, or you can join me in the next video because that's exactly what we're going to be talking about.